One thing anime fans are quite familiar with is the term the manga came first. Countless anime began life as manga, which makes sense. There's a lot of them, so when it comes to making a comparatively costly animated show, companies can pick from numerous titles to adapt. Over the last 10 years, light novels have increasingly become the source material for many shows, probably more than 10 years, but you know what I mean. And with them came all the long titles. But sometimes it doesn't go like that at all. In fact, there are several instances where animes are actually adaptations of video games. So yeah, it's not just a one-way road, but rather a road less traveled. While there are several known cases, there are also instances where the anime is perhaps relatively or somewhat known, but the video game source material somehow lives on in obscurity. I compiled a list of 10 animes whose source material are video games, which inherently makes this list incomplete, of course. There's obviously more than 10, but the list contains games and shows I find interesting or am able to share some info about, even if there are occasions where I haven't watched or played one or the other. By the way, no guarantees about how obvious some of these shows or games are. I decided to cap the video at 10, by the way, because I ended up with a really large list, and there's going to be another list of 10 that I'll upload at a later date. If you watch the channel, you'll probably be able to predict at least a few games and shows here and there, but I do hope I was able to at least talk about some that you didn't know about. Of course, if you know of some yourself, mention them in the comments below. This list isn't ranked or anything, and I'll make sure to give you a bit of a premise of the show and game in case this is the first time you heard about them. Let's start with this one. Here's a very famous horror anime, Higurashi. It was very popular when it first aired in the 2000s. I really like it, though it has some unintentionally funny visuals from time to time. Specifically the first season. The show's premise revolves around a group of friends trying to solve murder mysteries in their town of Hinamizawa, which is modeled actually after a real historic town called Shirakawa-go. You might want to look that up, it's kind of cool. It's a very pretty looking town. The series is known for its brutal and violent scenes, creepy atmosphere, and also deep, interconnected plot. Yeah, if there's ever like a show with a big character relationship chart, then yeah, this is it. Higurashi was actually first a doujin game, and doujin means self-published, by the way, not specifically hentai, just in case some of you don't know. It came out in 2002, and it had an art style that took some getting used to, let's say. It wasn't exactly, the best-looking thing ever. The VN ended up being adapted to several media, including manga, novels, light action, drama CDs, and of course anime, which is probably how most people have experienced the series. While the, in my opinion, high quality of the story is down to the original VN creator, everything else like the character art, atmosphere, and music was really improved upon in the anime. The original run had some funny facial expressions going on, like I said, but the latest material is very high in terms of quality. The show's music is so good too. I've driven home from work down rural roads in the middle of the night with the soundtrack on the stereo, and it makes for quite an atmospheric experience. The music in the original visual novel was it wasn't actually memorable at all because it used license-free stock music. Talk about a contrast there. Higurashi is definitely one of my favorite shows of all time, and yeah, that's why I wanted to mention it in this video. We'll stay with the same genre with the next one here, Corpse Party. I'm sure the game is more known, but the game's history stretches back farther than some people may expect. If you don't know, Corpse Party is about a group of students who perform a ritual that supposedly binds them all together so that they may stick together as a group after graduation. Unfortunately for them, it actually transports them to a long-demolished school that stood in place of the current school building. Run down and constantly changing layout, this school building has also trapped students from other schools who tried the same ritual. With them are a number of hostile ghosts and spirits that make the lives of the protagonists unfun. Like Higurashi, this was originally a self-published game too, except instead of being a visual novel, Corpse Party was actually an RPG game for the NEC PC 9801, or just PC 98 I think is often referred to. If you're interested in computing, you might want to look up that NEC PC 98 stuff. It's worth a read. Published in the 90s, it was made using RPG Maker, so I'm pretty sure it's actually one of the first RPG Maker games. It got its big break when it was remade for the PSP, where it got a lot more fans and a lot more ports too. And then later on there's sequels and also even spin-offs. The anime is actually a collection of OVAs. There was an OVA called Corpse Party Missing Footage, and then a set of 4 OVAs called Tortured Souls. not exactly what I would call a season's worth of episodes. I haven't watched any of the show, but I have played the PSP version extensively. Both PSP games, actually, even the point-and-click one. And going from the episode descriptions, the OVAs show several of the events from the first game, but it does seem rushed because, well, that's a low episode count there. The game is filled with numerous bad endings and events that would be impossible to cram into, just like 5 episodes or whatever. In case you're interested, there's also several manga adaptations, one of which even has an added character. I think like a trap character was added for some reason. I can't quite remember. And there's even 2 live action seasons, if that's your thing. Now, this one's a pretty obvious one here. Nekopara. Nekopara was a visual novel before it became an anime. Nekopara follows Kasho Himinaduki, a man who decides to open a confectionery shop. The story follows his and his catgirl's daily lives, because catgirls are just normal in that world. It's one of the most popular games in the 2014 and 15, anime boom thing on Steam there. Its success brought an OVA, then an actual season with another one coming out in the future as well. While the visual novel has like 2 versions, like adult and all ages, the show itself is more an all ages sort of thing. They're seeking a broader audience there, I suppose. I have played the VNs, but I haven't seen the anime. Going by the episode descriptions, it does seem that the anime doesn't follow the game events exactly, hence why these are normally called adaptions. Doesn't mean that it'll all be the same. But, given the theme and story of Nekopara, I'm not really surprised. You can change the story around without losing the general tone of what's going on. Also worth mentioning here is that Nekopara, or at least the 2 characters, Chocola and Vanilla, have existed many years prior to the game in the form of, art and illustrations, often not family friendly, just so you know. I remember, seeing these characters, maybe in 2008 or so, back then, and Sairui actually drew them in different types of clothing. They looked much more gothy. Over the years, the outfits became more cute and colorful until a story was finally developed around these characters, which I guess led to the visual novels. By the way, I don't think the other characters like Coconut or Maple or any of them existed before the game, though. And now we come to Pokemon. When I was a kid in the 90s and Pokemania swept the world, I actually wasn't aware that the game was released first. I thought the anime was. But after checking air dates and release dates, I found out that in Germany, where I lived at the time, the show actually aired first, September 1st, 1999, and then the games were released October 8th of the same year. Back then, stuff from Japan took a few years to come over. Usually North America got things like a year after Japan, and then Europe 2 years after. So that's most likely how the source material ended up being released after the adaption in Germany. I checked the US release dates, and it looks like the show was aired first there as well. September 8, 1998 for the show, and then September 28th for Red and Blue. I think that's quite interesting. I'm not sure if that was intentional. Maybe they thought, hey, maybe we'll show we'll show the anime first and then release the games. Because, especially back then, all the different world markets were treated quite differently compared to now. But who knows? Watchers of this channel knew this was going to come up. Neptunia. Based on the Hyperdimension Neptunia games, Neptunia the animation was born. Neptunia is about personified game consoles. The 4 main characters are goddesses that represent 4 different consoles, and each goddess rules over their own land. Each goddess has a normal and transformed form. In the beginning, each goddess represented a specific console, like Neptune was the Sega Neptune, Noir the PS3, Vert the Xbox 360, and Blonde the Nintendo Wii. But over time, they kind of went away with that and they just represent the manufacturer rather than specific models. The anime was conceived after the first 3 mainline titles, and the show does reimagine and change several of the events of the games. It's all a bit mixed together. Various story arcs of the first 3 games are in the anime in some way. The way the world is represented is actually very good. You get a nice visual reference of how the various countries look, which isn't something the game always does well. Sometimes you're, just left to your imagination there. I actually made an entire video about the Neptunia anime, and it's very in-depth. So yeah, if you're interested in that, there's a link in the top right and also in the description. Here's another often talked about game on this channel, Senran Kagura. I don't think a lot of people were introduced to the series by the anime without knowing the games, but there's bound to be some. The series is about ninja girls from different schools, some of which are considered good or evil factions. One of the themes throughout the series are the similarities between the factions and the girls. Senran Kagura has 2 different timelines, as the games began on the 3DS, but later also had PlayStation and /PC releases. So basically a 3DS and a PlayStation timeline. That's usually how they're called, or timeline 1 or 2. There's different names for that. The anime follows the 3DS timeline from the first game relatively faithfully, but since the 3DS timeline is basically missing a whole faction, things got a bit weird for the staff in charge of the anime. The PlayStation timeline introduced a whole new group of girls, including Yumi, who turned out being the most popular character in the series. So in the anime, they had to kind of introduce the group in an OVA between the 2 seasons. But, that happens here and there. Adaptions are often, they often stray from the source material and have to backtrack or somehow realign themselves. The show is actually more ecchi than the games are, since there's nipplage. In terms of art style, I think the anime does a decent job of not straying too far from the game. Here's an example where most people, in the West anyways, probably have more experience with the anime, despite the fact that it's actually very known that it's a game. It's Kantai Collection, or Kankula as it's also called. It's a game about anthropomorphized ships, warships, specifically. It was super popular, which is why basically anybody into anime has somehow been exposed to it. It was super popular, which is basically why almost everybody into anime has been exposed to the series in some way. The reason a lot of us couldn't play it because it was in Japanese only. Of course, there's guides and stuff, but for most people, that's not exactly the most enjoyable experience. And then Azur Lane was like, hey, let's take this shipgirl theme and let foreigners play it and make money. But anyway, Kantai Collection was turned into an anime. Except for some voice lines, there wasn't really much in terms of character substance. So for the show, they had to really expand on that and make them more fleshed out, as characters. Honestly, I think that's a bit strange. It's like how the game mechanics were adapted. It just doesn't really make sense how anything really works. Like the fact that they're all skating along the water surface and arrows turn into airplanes and stuff like that. There's an official explanation for everything, and how it works, but I think it's a bit of a stretch. But still, I did enjoy the show despite that. I mean, I've watched stranger stuff. Now I'm going to talk about 4 games and animes at once, but I'm just going to count them as one, because it actually makes sense to talk about all of them in one go. And that's Kanon, Air, Clannad, and Little Busters. What do they have in common? They're all highly successful and revered visual novels by a company called Key, known for their emotional storylines, among 18 plus other reasons. I forgot how wonky the eyes looked on their earlier VNs. They're so far apart. Kyoto Animation made the anime adaptations of Kanon, Air, and Clannad. They were quite popular, especially Clannad, which I personally watched. Back then, the big shows from that studio at the time were Haruhi Suzumiya, Clannad, and also Lucky Star. Fans were waiting and expecting Kyoto Animation to adapt Little Busters as well, but that never happened. It did become an anime, but it was JC's staff that animated it. My memories are a bit vague. I did watch a few episodes and then dropped it. I can't remember why exactly, but it must have, not caught my interest as much as other shows that I was watching. Yeah, since this is, by the way, 4 shows I'm talking about, maybe just Google what each of these is about. They're all different, but they all have but because they're all visual novels, they all have, the whole, romantic relationship stuff going on. So we've already mentioned Kenichiro Takagi's more famous creation, Senran Kagura, but here's another one of his works. It's Valkyrie Drive. Like Senran Kagura, it features hack and slash combat and an all-female cast, similar to Senran Kagura, though the plot is different. The story is that certain girls are infected by a virus, which allows them to either transform into a weapon, if they become aroused, or wield said weapon. It's very ecchi and fanservice-y, as you can imagine from that description. The very predominant Yuri elements led to the game being banned in several countries, but in reality, when, talking in ESRB terms, it's just an M-rated game, so nothing too outrageous. The anime goes a bit beyond that by showing a bit more nudity. I haven't seen the show, but I have played the game quite a bit. Something I think is a good idea with the anime is that they focused on a different pair of girls as the main cast. So if you only played the game and are wondering if you should watch the show, or perhaps the other way around, then a different cast might be a good idea because, you're getting a different story rather than just an adaptation of the thing you just played or watched. While certain games and shows stick around for a couple of years in terms of popularity, there are others that remain in the consciousness of gamers and anime fans for decades. One of those is the Fate series. Fate Stay Night was originally a visual novel / eroge that was published in 2004. It and its roots had multiple adaptations. Over the years, it has become a huge media franchise. There's games, anime, manga, and spin-offs, and all kinds of stuff. Very impressive considering, how it started. Well, I'm sure many of you don't need an explanation. I'll give you a basic summary. Fate Stay Night is about something called the Holy Grail War, where the winner is granted a wish by the Holy Grail. Each person has a hero that fights with them. That's paraphrased from Wikipedia because, despite the popularity, I have not played, watched, or read anything related to the series, except I've seen Prisma Ilia, which is a spin-off. And yeah, that's very different from the source material. I've actually also played Fate Extella, which is a very fun hack and slash game, but yeah, I don't remember the story. But even so, anybody into anime will have encountered many of the Fate series characters. Saber is very known and has like millions of figures released over the years. Tosaka Rin for years was also used as the example of both a tsundere character and also, as a example of what Zetai Ryuki is. And on it goes. So yeah, those are just 10 instances where the game came first. Like I said, I've got a list of another 10 games and shows that I'll actually post sometime later. Or if you are watching later, it may already be out, and you'll probably see that with links in the description or whatever it may be. So if you think I missed anything, it might be in that video, or it won't, I guess. It just depends. Thanks for watching anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again in the next video.